January of 2026, you had the idea to start a podcast. What led you to want to do this?
Just processing everything that happened with my father passing away and everything that the Holy Spirit was doing over the last several years, and sharing how I'd been able to have a conversation with my dad about the importance of surrendering his life to Jesus. My mom put my dad on the phone, and I just said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I know you and I don't talk like this, so forgive me, but I've been thinking a lot about you ever since you wrote the letter to us, and it seems like you're reflecting on your time on earth is starting to come to a close." We got a call from my mom on a Tuesday morning and basically said, "Your dad's in the hospital, and he was in a medically induced coma, and you need to get down here."
It's now up to the Spirit to work within that person, but it's our job as believers, as Christians, to plant that seed.
100%. That's what we were there for.
Chapstick, you need any?
Yeah.
That's how we start the podcast. Okay. January of 2026, right now. You had the idea to start a podcast.
Yep.
What led you to want to do this?
Yeah, a bunch of different things. So I guess the biggest instigating event was my father's passing in August 2025. And just reflecting on the events that led up to his death, going back to my uncle's passing in 2023, but just processing everything that happened with my father passing away, certain things and conversations that I was having with my friends, with you, friends at the gym, friends at church. When I was sharing kind of the story about my dad and everything that the Holy Spirit was doing over the last several years, it dawned on me, I need to be having these conversations one-on-one with individuals. I think that's with my kids, we've talked obviously a lot about his passing and just processing it all as a family, and even just having conversations with each of my kids. There have just been certain realizations that come through those conversations with friends at the gym. Actually, it was right after, about 2 weeks after my dad passed away, I was talking with a friend at the gym and sharing how I'd been able to have a conversation with my dad about a month before he passed about the importance of surrendering his life to Jesus. And in the course of that conversation with my friend at the gym, he said, "Man, God's been smacking me in the face with that word, surrender, all week." And so that was the first time where I thought, that's interesting. That's weird. And so I just started paying attention to those conversations. Surrender it's a hard concept. It was hard for me. I didn't surrender my life until I was 35 years old. I grew up going to church, going to Sunday school. Our family, we never really talked about pursuing God, having a relationship with God, what a relationship with God really means. So I grew up, I think, like a lot of men in America who, we're told you can be anything you want to be in America. We're just put your mind to it, work hard, put your head down. All of these messages we get in our society are, your will focused.
Like, as in my will.
Right.
My will be done.
My will be done. And so I didn't understand until I was in my mid-30s. My will be done led me to a really, really bad place. And so I saw that with my father. I saw that a little bit, I think, with this friend. I've in talking with other friends, I think we all experience a lot of the same thing. So I think surrender is it's a hard word. It's a hard concept. And even when you start to grasp, okay, so I need to focus on God's will in my life and put his will in my life first. It's hard to unpack, years of living a certain way and undoing that. That's a hard concept. So,
do you think that was your dad's biggest issue?
I think it was one of the biggest issues. I for sure. I think, he grew up, so he was 84 when he passed away, and he grew up in that, in his day, it was, children are seen and not heard, speak when you're spoken to, all these different things, work hard. If you just work hard, you can achieve the American dream, American dream, American dream. And I think there was a lot of keeping up with the Joneses. I think it's, success. Success is everything. Money is everything. If you just have money, that's what I took out of, and just watching him with his own businesses and work, is if he could just make enough, if he could just make enough money, if he could just do this, do that, whatever the dollar figure is, then he would be happy. And I don't remember him ever being overwhelmingly happy. I just think as far as his will, I think it was just this outsized focus on achievement. And so instead of, I'm one of 5 kids and we're your achievement, we're your legacy,
But you take it he didn't feel that way.
I don't know. It's one of the conversations we had, the last conversation I had with him. So he wrote us a letter on Father's Day last year, and he clearly was reflecting on the end of his life.
How was his health at this time?
He had a lot of different health issues going on, including depression, I think. History of Parkinson's in my family, cancer as well. And so we knew he had some health issues, but we never really knew the extent to which they were progressing. I just started to pick up on some things where it seemed like something's happening with the writing of this letter. It was a little bit out of character for him. And it made me think, okay, he's starting to kind of see the end of his life on earth. And he's reflecting on that. That's about the extent to which I knew what his, we weren't particularly close, as close as I'm sure both he and I would have liked, but those kind of details he didn't necessarily share with me. So
did he write one letter to the whole family, or a letter to each of you?
To the kids. Yeah, to each of his 5 kids.
So each kid got a letter?
The same letter.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just seemed like he was starting to see the end coming. It actually started to freak me out, to be honest with you. I started panicking. I thought, with that letter, I thought that was strange. And then my family's from Houston, and my folks were starting to look at moving out to Virginia pretty suddenly, where my middle brother lives. And that was a bit out of the blue. And
that seemed like an odd decision.
It was an odd decision, yeah. And so, I texted my oldest brother and said, "Hey, is something going on with Dad? Are you picking up on anything since you're in Houston?" And he said, no. He basically said, nothing out of the ordinary that he could tell. But yeah, I just started, the point being, and Jessica, my wife, has told me this a few times, is you were panicking. I was panicking over the need. I had this overwhelming need to have a conversation with my dad about his eternal life and surrendering to Jesus. And so,
was there something else in the letter other than the potential move? Was there something else in the letter that made you feel that way?
No, it was just that it was out of the blue. He hadn't written all of the kids a letter in quite some time. And just on Father's Day, it was odd. It was not like him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just different factors had me panicking and just feeling that I needed to be the one to have a conversation with him. And thankfully, we were able to have that conversation. We were able to talk about what I felt was important, that he needed to understand about the importance of giving his life over to Jesus. And yeah, it was the most, in a conversation between the two of us, that type of conversation we'd never had in our entire lives.
Yeah, because you were not raised a Christian, right?
We were, in that we went to Sunday school. We went to two different Sunday schools. We went to, so my mom's side of the family was Christian Scientist, and my dad's family went to United Methodist Church in Houston, St. Luke's United Methodist Church, and we ping-ponged back and forth. Obviously, two very different.
Yeah, a little bit of a divided house in terms of religion.
Mm-hmm. You know, my middle brother and I went through the confirmation process at the Methodist Church when we were 13, 14, around that. But I don't recall much from that. But more importantly, I think, you know, the acceptance and the surrender of my will and my life to Jesus's life and will, that never happened. There was never a conscious decision for us to do that. We were baptized when we were babies, but, you know. So we grew up going to church, but never, it was not an active pursuit. It was not an active conversation in our household.
So when you had that conversation with your dad last year, mm-hmm. It had become more important to you.
My faith?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in 2018 is when I gave my life over to Jesus, when I surrendered. Basically had hit rock bottom with addiction, with all kinds of things. My life, my will, it was not going well. You know, I was on paper, everything was great. Married, kids, but I was spiraling out of control. I was living on the path to alcoholism, just various kinds of addictions. I think my father struggled with addiction as well.
Did you ever talk about that with him?
No, it's something that I wanted to talk to him about. In my mind, it would have been an amazing conversation to have. It would have been amazing to have my father battling addiction, leading the way for our family, and letting us know, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm dealing with. And it's something you need to be aware of and that you need to fight. So, as amazing that would have been, even just having a conversation with him, you know, at this point in our lives, to say, hey, this is what I've been through, and just see that in one another. I never got to talk to him about that. Again, that generation is just different than ours. They don't necessarily talk about feelings, mm-hmm. emotions, struggles, hardships. You good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so thankfully, it's a conversation that I have with my kids and prepare them for regularly. Mm-hmm. No, I would have loved to have shared that with him, more so because I didn't know what he was going through. I didn't know the struggles that he was facing, and I just feel like he was all alone with his demons.
You feel he felt he was alone?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some things that your parents do or don't do kind of sets up what you are going to do or not do for your kids.
Yeah.
You know, not being able to have that conversation with your dad now kind of gives you the opportunity to realize how important that would have been, how impactful that would have been. And that's something you want to open up for your kids.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you had that conversation with so you got his letter, then you had a conversation with him. How did that conversation go?
It was good. It was, they were in Virginia looking at homes. I called my mom and I said, "Hey, Mom, I really would like to talk to Dad. I'd like to have a conversation with him. You know, when is a good time to talk?" And she said, "Actually, he's right here. Do you want to talk? Now's a good time." And he was doing well that day. And so I guess before I get into that, so I had in my panic over needing to have this conversation with my dad, was talking all this through with my wife, and she had asked, "Well, how do you think that's going to go?" It is a very uncharacteristic response from me, which was, "It doesn't matter how it goes. He just needs to hear this."
You can't control how he reacts to that.
No.
But you felt like it's something you needed to do.
Needed to do it. So my mom put my dad on the phone, and I just said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I know you and I don't talk like this. We don't have these types of conversations. So forgive me, but I've been thinking a lot about you ever since you wrote the letter to us. And it seems like you're reflecting on, your time on earth is starting to come to a close. And I just wanted to talk about surrendering. And I know for us, men like us, that's a hard concept. And so this is what it means." And we just had that probably about a 5, 6, 7, 8 minute conversation. And his response was, "Thank you so much. Yeah, this means a lot to me." And he told me he loved me, and it was very short. It was very brief. There was no deep exploration. It was just, "I appreciate it," kind of a thing. And that's about how I expected it would go. It's about all I had hoped for. And it's what I needed. But one of the things I did tell him was, "Hey, I'm sending you this book." And it was this book that I discovered through actually Sean Ryan's podcast by the author John Burke, his former pastor, and it's called "Imagine the God of Heaven." And so I guess taking a couple steps back. So my uncle, my mom's sister's husband, passed away in January 2023. And, he was just a great man, a man of profound faith, and quintessential British man. And as a kid, I used to call him, he hated it. He hated it so much. but he let me do it because he had a great sense of humor. But I used to call him Mr. Baldy Flatty Head Man. He hated that so much.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so, so anyways, he passed away in January 2023 in England. And my aunt, my mom's sister, was telling our family over FaceTime just about Uncle Pete's last few days, and in particular, the last moments of his life. And he was in and out of consciousness. And his final words to my aunt were, Saul of Tarsus, he got it. And I don't know why, when she told us that, that stuck with me.
It's a pretty epic final phrase to say.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it pierced right through me. And then I asked her a couple months later about it. And I repeated the words back to her, and she said, yeah, that is what he said. And you're the only one who's actually asked me about that. And I said, well, I feel like it's pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, no, yeah. So it started me down this path of, what was that? What was he seeing? And then I came upon this Sean Ryan's podcast with John Burke, talking about all these people who have these near-death experiences and what they saw. You know, some saw heaven, some would see hell, and ended up surviving these near-death experiences and relaying their accounts to John Burke. And so when I heard that podcast, again, it just went right through me, and it immediately brought up my uncle's comments. And it was just fascinating because, okay, he was seeing the other side.
Yeah, something happened that made him...
Something, yeah. Exactly what, I don't know, but the Apostle Saul, got it. So then I ordered his book, John Burke's book, Imagine the God of Heaven, in, May 2024, after I heard the podcast, and just started reading it. And nothing outside of the Bible had ever cut through to me and gotten through to me and made the reality of heaven more vivid and more clear and more hopeful. And, you know, my wife and I had a miscarriage a couple years ago, and it just devastated us. And in reading this book, I got so hopeful about seeing the baby we lost. We refer to him as Isaiah, in heaven. And it just, nothing got through to me like that. And, so when my dad was going through all of this stuff, and when he was in Virginia, and I was having that conversation with him, and I said, Dad, I'm sending you this book, and I need you to read it, because I need you to understand that this is all very real. And this is the most important thing.
You sent him a copy of the book, Imagine the God of Heaven.
I did.
Was this before or after your conversation with him?
I ordered it, and then I had the conversation with him. So I think I ordered it earlier in that day, and it was going to be there the next day, off of Amazon. So, and he's like, yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I was looking back at my texts yesterday from him, and he texted me, hey, the book's here. Thank you so much. I love you. So, yeah.
Is that the last thing? Is that the last time you two ever discussed the book?
It's the last time we spoke. Well, I briefly talked to him a couple weeks later after we played at church one Sunday. But yeah, that was the last substantive conversation we had. Yeah, and where it gets even crazier, where it gets more bizarre is that my dad actually had his own near-death experience where he ended up going to the hospital. We got a call from my mom on a Tuesday morning and basically said, your dad's in the hospital. And he was in a medically induced coma. And yeah, you need to get down here because he wasn't going to survive. And so he was in intensive care in that coma for 36 hours, which was long enough for my brother, both my brother and I, to get there, and our other siblings were in Houston, so they were able to be at the hospital. And yeah, we were able to be there for the final 24 hours of his life, and we were able to pray over him, read scripture to him. And I was able to have a conversation with, one-sided conversation with him in the hospital room, but to say to him that, Dad, okay, this is it. This is what we've been talking about. And now's the time. You have to surrender. This is it. And so, from my uncle, and there were some other things and some other interactions that we'd had with families and friends who had also had near-death experiences, but from my uncle's final words, to reading this book, to sharing it with my dad, and then he has his own near-death experience, it's just not a coincidence. And I can't be convinced otherwise. And so it again, reflecting on, back to your first question on why the podcast, I was never one to, I grew up skeptical of any of this stuff. But this whole journey of the last few years has erased any doubt, any skepticism. I don't know. I felt compelled. I've got to share the story, person to person, friend to friend. And I think what God has done in our lives, my father's life, the opportunity for redemption in that hospital room, the opportunity for us to disciple to one another and just talk to one another and share with one another what God has done in our lives. I don't think there's anything more important than that. Mm-hmm. And so,
and I know your dad passed away before he came out of the coma.
Yeah.
But you have a sense of there was some closure. You had a sense that he was able to hear you during this time. And
yeah, well, yeah, that's the thing. Again, going with the skepticism. Okay, so in the fall of 2024, as I'm reading through this book, I meet one of my son's classmates' parents. So my son's classmate's father is an amputee, and so my immediate thought was that he served in the military, which my son is very interested in. It's his dream is to go into Charlie's dream is to go into the military and special forces, and so we both assumed that. And so I was having a conversation with his wife one day, just asking about her husband, and if he was in the military. And she said, no, everyone thinks that. But actually, when we were just starting to get to know each other or just starting to date, I forget exactly, I think her dog actually scratched his eye or skin somewhere, gave him this horrible bacterial infection, and ended up resulting in having to go into a coma. And I'm butchering the story, I'm sure, but point being is he coded on the way to the hospital and in the ambulance. And so I apologized to her, his wife, and I said, I'm so sorry to ask and to pry, but I'm reading this book about near-death experiences, and does he remember anything about that? And she kind of smiled at me and was like, actually, yeah, he remembers being above the ambulance, outside of the ambulance, as they were going down the highway, I think, and just going along with the ambulance. And
wow.
Yeah, right. And so many people, and the stories in this book, these people remember certain details that they would never, like a sticker on the top of a fan in the hospital room, that they would never.
There's no feasible way for them to know.
There's no feasible way for them to know that. And so, again, I'm skeptical about everything until my uncle's death and reading through this book and listening to John Burke on these various podcasts. And so I just started to become open to these possibilities. And so, which was all preparing me for when I got to my dad's hospital room, knowing without a shadow of a doubt that he could hear us. He was somewhere in that room. But I knew without question that he could hear us. One of my sisters actually, and my mom as well, asked, do you think he can hear anything we're saying? And without missing a beat, absolutely. He can hear you. Talk to him. Let's pray with him. Let's read scripture. And so, I never would have been in that position mm-hmm. of thinking that were possible. I don't know, 10 years ago, I would have been like, well, that's a tragedy.
So I know you and I have talked about this, the conversations that you've overheard in podcasts led you to purchase a book that you might not have otherwise
never
purchased. You started seeing some situations in real life that kind of backed up what you were reading in this book. Yeah. Felt the need to share that with your dad. Your dad confirmed that he got it. You don't know how much he read of it. You don't know how much he was able to decipher of what you were saying in that room, but you just get a sense that the way it happened was, it was maybe not meant to happen that way, but the way it happened just seemed a little more than a coincidence.
Yeah, it was not a coincidence. I think it was, I firmly believe and know that we have our own free will, and just actions and everything that, and all the events that transpired led us to that hospital room. And I know that God knew what was coming and created a situation in which we were going to be able to pray over, read scripture to my father, wherever he was in that moment, wherever his soul was in that moment. And that because of that situation, he would have an opportunity to cry out to God, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. 100%, that's what we were there for. And so it's not my doing. I was just a vessel that was listening and open to God's will. And there was going to be a situation where my father needed an opportunity to cry out for Jesus. I don't know how else to explain it other than that, but I don't have a sense of, did he? It's not really important.
Yeah.
Because the situation wouldn't have been there otherwise if he didn't.
And I think that's where a lot of people get when they're sharing their faith, when they're witnessing to someone. I think they can get in their own head about it if they witness to someone and that person just kind of says thanks but no thanks.
Yeah.
That person has done person has done their job.
Yeah.
It's now up to the Spirit to work within that person, but it's our job as believers, as Christians, to plant that seed. That's all that we have to do.
Yeah.
And then let the Spirit do the rest.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jesus talks about, the seeds that are going on various grounds, and some take root, some don't. We can't force it. We can't convince someone into faith. All we can do is share what we know and pray for them that they're receptive to what the work of the Spirit after that.
Yeah. That's exactly right. The first time that I would say that the gospel was shared with me was actually in 2008 when I was working for an individual here in Tennessee. It was right before my wife and I got married. I had been working in Austin, got this temporary job here in Franklin, and just was driving around with this great man, and he just was sharing the gospel with me and asking me questions about just getting to know me and all this stuff. So he planted the seed, to your point, in 2008, and it took 10 years for me to commit my life to Christ. So and a whole lot of mistakes and all that, but right, he was faithful. He was sharing the gospel, and then others came in and watered the seed. My wife gets so much of the credit for waterboarding the seed, but but she she gets so much of the credit and dragged me, thankfully, mercifully, to church and to a small group. And so we're called to respond, right, and to be faithful. And you don't know what role you're playing in any one individual's life, but just share what God has done, and then trust that you're serving God's will and that God has a plan for each individual person that you share the gospel with. So, yeah,
it's so interesting that the guy who was witnessed, who was able to see himself come on in the ambulance, and John talks about this in the book, how some people, I know that not every near-death experience is believable or factual.
Right.
So he has some rules for discerning which ones actually hold truth. I know that for some people, it's not a story that they're necessarily wanting to tell. Because of how some people might take it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting about all the stories that John has collected and the stories that you've seen in your own life. You had to go and ask. Like, it wasn't, they weren't broadcasting it. You had to go and ask.
Right.
Because they're a little hesitant to share.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because of the perception that comes along with that, or what, but it's I can see why the people that John talks about in the book that are Islamic or Muslim who turn against their faith to Christianity, which is a radical change. And, they're excommunicated from their church, from their
Families.
and it can have profound effects. And so those tend to carry a little bit more weight, that they're actually making changes in their life, like huge changes. This is not oh, I had this experience and now, interview me, all this stuff. It's not like a get written. No, it can potentially negatively impact
everything
in their life.
Right.
Even though it's positively impacting their walk with Christ, but negatively impacting everything else.
Well,
It's so interesting.
I never, it's so funny. See, it's the exact point. I never would have put that together, but you put that together with my son's teammate's father, how I had to go and seek that out. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, it's just, in sharing these stories, you don't know how it's going to strike someone and strike a different person differently, and what they're going to pick up from it. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah. It's just, it's so odd. I've never experienced anything like that, but there's no telling who has, but has just decided to keep it to themselves or not broadcast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, back to what are we doing here with this podcast? So I mean, hopefully we're going to be talking with a number of different folks just about their experiences, not near-death experiences, but just their walk with Jesus, what God has done in their lives, ordinary people, and how they've been impacted. And who knows, I actually ran into someone we've talked to about coming on yesterday, ironically enough, and told him, hey, Bo and I, we're getting together tomorrow. And it's a story about how this one individual was without a job for 13 months. And, what you go through, what any, husband, provider, father goes through in that situation. Thankfully, I haven't been there yet.
It's one of those situations I hope I never have to go through, because as the man of the family, you do have that expectation on you.
Yeah.
And when you're to the point where you're not able to provide for your family, I can see it being very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And so when he, in that process, in that 13 months and going on hundreds of interviews, job interviews, and then finally just literally giving it over to God and listening to, okay, God, and asking, okay, this isn't working. What do you want from me? What do you want me to do? Goes and starts painting actually the inside of our church, and then gets connected to a job, and now he's back doing some of the things that he loves to do, like writing music. They just came out with an album yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, which is wild. And so it's just, but then I was, one of my daughter's teammates on a soccer team, that teammate's father was going through a prolonged job loss. And so I just had lunch with our friend, and it just, anyways, I started sharing that with that father. It's just connecting the dots. It's just, I don't know, that hopefully we're going to be able to share some of these stories that connect with just ordinary people out there going through different struggles, and hopefully these are stories that are helpful, that are inspiring, and hopeful, really.
It's amazing what God can do with circumstances in your life that may not seem ideal, may seem tragic. It's amazing what God can take from that and turn into something positive.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could share my father and I had some, as I said, we weren't the closest. He was much closer with both of my brothers and my two sisters, which I'm grateful for that and for them to have had that close relationship. We butted heads as I was growing up, in large part because I was a stubborn teenager who absolutely knew better than my dad, without question. And
I've got a couple of those in my house.
yeah. So I take a lot of the blame for it. But you'd asked earlier, were he and I able to have a conversation about addiction? No. But one of the things that in that situation, in that tragic situation, and in the hospital room, when I just had a moment with just he and I've been dreaming of having a conversation with him for years about, do you know what I've gone through? Do we, how much you could have helped me and all these things, and, very immature approaches to the conversation, on one-sided conversation in my head. But in the hospital room, I was able to just say, Dad, I forgive you for everything. And I'm sorry for everything. And man, I've never experienced forgiveness like that before. Everything I've been holding on to for years is gone. It was gone. I don't know, man. And the other part of that forgiveness was my brother and I had not, my middle brother and I had not really spoken that year in months. And in the hospital room, we both forgave each other for what we had done that contributed to that distance between the two of us, and that was gone.
I read a quote the other day that forgiveness is not for the weak. It takes strength to be able to forgive.
I'm so strong.
Sorry. That's what you needed to hear. That's what you needed to hear.
I'm sorry. No, sorry. That was really good. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, but it was, there's been a few holidays where I've wondered, when the kids or the wife asks, what do you want? And like and there's been a few of them where all I wanted was just forgiveness, clean slate. Because we've talked, we both battled with addiction before, and it's hard on the loved ones, the lies, the failing here and then again and again. It's tough, and it erodes trust with the ones that love you. And yeah, that's one of those things. It's not easy to do, but it's just one of those things. I think if you can, I think it's almost selfish because it releases you. It releases the tension for you. When you forgave your father, it released you. Do you feel that?
Yeah. That was deep. That was really good. Yeah. I think it released this anger. Like it released me from the anger. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And from the resentment.
And consciously, you didn't even know you were holding it.
No idea. Well, I mean, I knew I was a bit resentful. Mm-hmm. I think I said, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm over everything. But really, no. But I certainly wasn't conscious of it at the time. It just, I don't know. It was one of those things at the time in the room. You know, you and I, we've talked, you know, at least from a perspective of being on the worship team together, of like a flow state, right? Where you're in a position of being, I don't know, it's a flow state, but it's also like, I describe it with my kids as being in tune with God. And I very vividly remember saying, God, Dad, I forgive you. I don't remember having a conscious thought behind it other than I'm forgiving you. I don't, if that makes sense. It's just in that moment of being present with my dad, but in that moment of being present with the spiritual aspect of my father, of my earthly father, is just, it was the thing to do. It was I don't know. It just happened. It was just like being in tune, it was just flowing out of me. I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, I was able to let go of all of that I was holding on to. And yeah.
What's one of your favorite memories of your dad?
Well, let me first answer it with this. My first memory of my dad was his Gillette foamy shave gel and the smell. It's one of the best smells to this day. Mm-hmm. Man, he was so unselfish with his time for all of us, all of the kids, with sports. He would spend hours with us, spend hours with me on the tennis court, spend hours with my middle brother at baseball field and out in front. We would, oh man, okay, so here it is. Yep. So we would play front yard baseball games. Man, we'd have neighbors come play. Our next door neighbor was my best friend at the time. Neighbors from down the street, we'd have these epic front yard baseball games. Tennis balls, but yeah, and he'd be all-time pitcher. Yeah, he was a good dad. He was much better than I gave him credit for when I was growing up, but man, he was devoted to his kids. Yeah.
That's one of the things you want to emulate.
Yeah.
For your own kids.
Yeah. The time spent with them, we drive a lot to and from school, but that time with them, I take most mornings I take the kids to school because I love that time with them. And yeah, he gave us time.
I asked an older friend that has kids that are living out on their own now. And he's about 10, 15 years older than me. And I asked him just like, what would you, knowing where I am, my kids are teenagers, what advice would you have for someone in my age with kids, teen kids, what advice would you give? And he said he would just take more trips, spend more time in the car together, because that's time when you kind of have them at your mercy, and more or less. And so conversations are going to happen because when you're at home, everybody's going somewhere doing something. But when you're in the car, you're all going somewhere together. Then that's more time together, more time for conversations to come up.
It's so funny that as a dad now, I used to think, oh, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it so much better being a father. It's just showed being a father and we have 4 kids, it's just shown me often how right he was on a lot of different things. Not everything,
Yeah.
but on a lot of different things. And so it's given me a much deeper appreciation for him. So, and my mom too, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I know it's a heavy story and one that's not easy to relive. Anything else that didn't fit into that structure that you want to talk about?
I think part of this whole journey and part of this journey is just not just sharing, what God has done, but how are we as individuals, as friends, as people who do life together in church and small groups, how are we seeking God? We go to church every Sunday. You and I participate on the worship team, and that's great. But what are we doing outside every day? How are we seeking God? And I think that's been something that's been really over the last few months, at front of mind for me is seeking God. And so I think and trying to be in tune with him and his will in our lives. And so
What's working for you?
yeah, reading different books. I've never been a huge book reader. You actually kind of inspired me with some of the books that you've read, but C.S. Lewis being an author. And so I've been diving into some books, A.W. Tozer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which something was going on in the 40s, which I want to talk about at some point, besides World War II, obviously.
Right.
Reading some of these massive names and reading their thoughts and their expositions on the Bible and on seeking God. It's been fascinating.
I know there's no shortage of books like this that are written to help people, whether it's devotional, a Bible study. How are you going about selecting the books that you want to read?
Recommendations from friends. We have a mutual friend who's wrote I believe a dissertation. He's PhD on Bonhoeffer, and I think there was a movie trailer about Bonhoeffer's life, and so I reached out to him and said, "Okay, where do I start?" So he gave me some suggestions. Just talking with former youth pastor who gave me a few suggestions, but podcasts also who give suggestions. That Blurry Creatures is a great podcast out there. They just had who's NT
NT Wright?
NT Wright on.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I ordered one of his books. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting what's out there in the podcast world for Christians. I think obviously, as you alluded to earlier, you got to be discerning, but I don't know.
That is one thing I've found with podcast. If there is a book that you're considering reading, a new book that has been released since the 1940s, there's a good chance the author has done a podcast interview about it. And so that's like a good way to get kind of introduced to it, to be like, oh, I may not have 20 hours to read all the big books that I'm interested in, but I can listen to a 30 or 60 minute podcast, hear them talk about it. And that's what happened with John.
Yep.
You heard the podcast, like, okay, this is a book that I want to
100%.
dig into. And then that had a profound impact of significance.
Yeah.
One thing, this may be controversial, just a Christian hot take. What I've been doing recently is on my drive to work. So this year, I was wanting to read through just the New Testament, just focus on reading through the New Testament again. So starting with Matthew, just aiming for a chapter a day. That's the goal. So I'll read it, and then the next morning, on my drive to work, I'll listen to it on the Bible app.
Right.
Then I switch over to ChatGPT. Bear with me. You do the voice mode with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I'll say, hey, I just read Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus is talking about the Sermon on the Mount. And you can ask questions about, just give me a summary of the chapter, and then you can dig in and ask questions about, is there any significance that I might have missed on just first read without digging into it? And it does pretty good about picking up some things that you may have missed. If you'll give me just a second.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Matthew chapter 5, when he saw the crowds, when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, and then he goes into the Sermon on the Mount. And so I read that when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. So this is, in Matthew, this takes up a substantial part of Matthew, just the Sermon on the Mount. He's giving his version of the law. And AI reminded me this was similar to when Moses went up on the mountain to get the 10 Commandments. So it's kind of showing this is a parallel to what happened with Moses going up, getting the law, bringing it down, where we see Jesus now coming up. He went up on the mountain, and after he sat down with them, his disciples came to him and he began teaching. So just little things like that where it makes the Bible more interactive. Now I know that AI is fallible, it can hallucinate, do all this stuff, but it is nice to have a way to talk and ask questions and dig in a little bit where you may not find otherwise.
Well, that's one of the fascinating things that, in our Bible study conversations, and I know what our mutual friend Justin would say is right, Jesus is the new and greater Moses. And I think back to that chart that shows it's not a bar chart, it's that line chart that shows how many different connections there are in the Bible. It's fascinating. Using AI to point that out. I have my own feelings about AI. I don't know. Listen, I don't know. I have no idea. But it's that's great though.
Yeah, it's just something.
It is a hot take.
It is a hot take. I know it may not be for everybody, but on the drive to work, it helps me to ask questions that I wouldn't normally. Because unless you're sitting there with a pastor or someone who's studied that and can answer those questions, it's hard to otherwise you just have to dig through and find the answers for yourself.
So just ask the Antichrist. That's great. No, I don't know. It's man.
And I know it's not for everybody, and for those who are completely turned off to it, you can get a Bible commentary, which are great. It's also very in-depth, usually more in-depth than most people want to go, which is why they're usually for a very specific audience.
Yeah.
But they can also shed some of that light on there too.
Yeah.
Anything that we didn't talk about that we should have?
No, I mean, you actually answered the question I was going to ask is, what are you reading? Like, what are you reading in the Bible? A chapter a day, which is great, of the New Testament. And then what are you reading outside of the Bible?
Well, I've got one embarrassing one.
Okay. Lord of the Rings.
No, Dungeon Crawler Carl.
That's worse. That's worse. What? Dungeon Crawler Carl. Carl.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's senseless. That's my fast food.
Okay.
That's my fast food book. I am actually reading a commentary on the book of John. It is more in depth, and it's really slow. But John is one of those books that it's one of the gospels that I spend the least amount of time in. Don't know why. And so I just felt like it was time to kind of dig in and learn more about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll put in the show notes which commentary I'm reading through. I can't think of who wrote it right now, but that's what that's the healthy food to balance out the
Nice.
dungeon crawler, Carl. What about you?
So I just finished the book of Hebrews, and I've been reading through Isaiah. And then outside of the Bible, it's like 5 different books that I'm reading at one time. It's not a good idea, but it's just how my brain works, is trying to read all these different things and then bring it all together in one cohesive thought. But I finished the audiobook of A.W. Tozer and The Pursuit of God, which is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I actually sent it to on Spotify to my oldest daughter. I said, hey, you're really going to like this. This is really good. And so I'm reading through the hard copy of it and taking notes, just because I retain things a lot better when I have a physical copy of it. And so yeah, that's it.
Let me ask this. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Assuming we have a next guest, what's a question that you would like, without any context, what's a question that you would like to ask the next guest?
What has God taught you? Yeah, I think that would be it. What are you learning from God? What has God taught you? And generally, yeah, how is he working in your life?
All right.
What about you?
I wasn't expecting to
Have to answer that?
have to answer that. This is open-ended, no context. How do you decide what to spend your time on? Maybe a better way. How do you decide where to direct your attention? Chris Williamson was saying, I saw a little clip where he said that most people think time is the most important thing, the most important resource we have, but it's attention. Because there's a way, if you put your attention in the right thing, the positive thing, you can make the most of your time. The time that passes, it can be very impactful. If you put your attention towards something negative or not redeeming, then it can make that time very detrimental. So attention being this valuable resource,
Yeah.
it's
That makes sense.
knowing how someone decides where to direct their attention, where to spend their time. That'd probably be my question.
Nice.
This has been great.
Yeah.
Episode 1
Episode 1.
in the can, so to speak.
More
All right,
to
man.
come.
Thanks.
All right.
Till next time.
Thanks, buddy.
See ya.
See ya.